we're high achieving smart women and we don't pause long enough to celebrate the little wins. To celebrate like, oh, I had planned to work out. I got my 30-minute workout in. I had a plan to create a day date with my husband and we went on a day date. Like, we don't stop enough. It's like we want the big things to celebrate, but we don't even want to celebrate ourselves and the things we're accomplishing. And I'll tell you, like, I remember like my doctorate graduation, I was just like so done that I didn't want to celebrate. And my girlfriend threw this party and I'm so glad that she like pulled me out of that nonsense because I had a blast. Hi, and welcome to the Stethoscopes to Swaddles podcast, episode number 81. Today on the podcast, we are going to be talking about awareness and celebration. We are going to define awareness and celebration. We're going to talk about how to become more aware. And then we're going to talk about what actually celebration is and why it's important. So welcome to the episode. Hey mama, you deserve a life free of overwhelm and burnout. Welcome to the Stethoscopes to Swaddles podcast. I'm your host, life and mindset coach, Shiro Bergbauer. I'm also a wife, mom, and CRNA. This is the podcast for high-achieving mamas in medicine like you and I. Together, we'll learn how to navigate the ups and downs of working motherhood. If you're looking to thrive in your relationships and overcome overwhelm in your motherhood, marriage, and medicine, you're in the right place. Welcome to the Stethoscopes to Swaddles podcast. I want you to think about the meaning of awareness from the dictionary definition, okay? And then I'm going to, because a lot of you listening are in anesthesia, we're also going to talk about a little bit of anesthesia awareness. But awareness, according to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, is the quality or state of being aware, knowledge and understanding that something is happening or exists. It's an acute awareness, or it could be a heightened awareness, whatever the awareness is. That's a good thing, right? And I wanted to bring up anesthesia awareness because that is not a good thing to have. Anesthesia awareness, which is awareness under anesthesia or accidental awareness during anesthesia, is a rare complication of general anesthesia where patients regained varying levels of consciousness during their surgical procedures. This is not an awareness that you want. This is the stuff that surgery nightmares are made of, anesthesia nightmares are made of. And unfortunately, the media has created this idea that people have awareness under anesthesia all the time. And I wanted to use this little moment to clarify that, because the incident of awareness is actually 0.1 to 0.2% of all patients who undergo general anesthesia, if that. And so again, there's a lot of issues, concerns that come with awareness. And that is not going to be the focus of this podcast. But I just wanted to kind of bring that up because somebody somewhere is going to say, well, if Shiro said awareness is great, well, awareness under anesthesia is not. So I want to be clear. I am not talking about that kind of awareness. Let's get started. So first, I want to talk about the 3 phases of consciousness, according to psychologist Sigmund Freud. And he basically was like, awareness is awareness of yourself in space and time. Awareness of both internal and external stimulus is consciousness. So when you're at the conscious level, which is the first level, that's the level in which you are aware of and you know things about yourself and your surrounding. And then there's a preconscious awareness, which is the things which we could pay conscious attention to, right, if we so desired. This is where many memories are stored so that we can easily retrieve them. So Freud saw the preconsciousness as those thoughts that are unconscious of the particular moment in question, but are not repressed and are therefore available for recall and easily capable of being conscious. Almost like that tip of the tongue effect. So I'll give you an example. It's not every day that you're thinking about what you were doing when 9/11 happened, right? But if I ask you, where were you when 9/11 happened? I'm sure you can tell me exactly where you are. And I'll tell you exactly where I was. I was a new college student. I had just transferred to this community college, and I was in the school library at Butler Community College. Those were the days when the internet was super slow. This is 2001, obviously. And I just remember somebody said, "We have been attacked." And I didn't understand what that meant. And so when somebody asks me what I was doing during 9/11, I still see, 18-year-old me, walk into the printer because I was printing something in one of my college papers. I can still remember that. So that's my preconscious consciousness, right? And then the unconscious consists of those things that are outside of conscious awareness, including many memories, thoughts, and urges of which we are not aware. Much of what is stored in the unconscious is thought to be unpleasant or conflicting. For example, sexual impulses that are deemed unacceptable. While these elements are stored out of our awareness, they are nevertheless thought to influence our behavior. Speaking of which, I'm not a big TV watcher, but I literally today was taking my braids down, as one does, watching Netflix. I came across this show called How to Change Your Mind. They were talking about psychedelics and all these things. One of the first people that were interviewed on this show was a guy who they do these monitored LSD inductions, and basically the guy had this moment, which I guess you would call it almost like an unconscious awareness, where he was back in his mother's womb and his cord was tied around his neck, and he had a moment of reckoning where he was like, what am I going to do with this thing? If I don't do anything, I'm going to die. And if I do something, I'm going to live. And he unwrapped the cord, and fast forward, he has a conversation with his mom, and his mom tells him how when he was in utero, he had all these issues with his heart rate at the last stage of the pregnancy. And so it was almost like he went back to that unconscious memory and was there while it was happening. It was crazy. Anyway, I would love to hear, by the way, your thoughts on this realm of the people are just discovering all these drugs, psychedelics. I'm just very intrigued by it. Again, I probably will never watch another episode until it's time to take my braids off again. Because then I also got sidetracked into watching some show about people who, I think it was called I'm a Killer or something. I don't even remember. Anyway, and then I got in that rabbit hole, as one does when you go on Netflix. Anyway, so I want to talk about the states of consciousness, because even in the conscious states, some of us are at a very low level of awareness of what is happening. And why I think it's important to address awareness is because, especially when you start doing thought work and you get in coaching, you start to realize you have this clarity about what actually causes you to do things. And one of the things for me that was a game changer is when I would say, I feel like you're doing this and this, I started to realize I wasn't actually describing an emotion. And so I started to pay more attention to what did I even mean when I said I feel like what was actually going on in my body. And so I thought this episode would be important because, especially with my clients that are, coming towards the end of their coaching term, they're either trying to decide if they want to renew, or they're wrapping up their coaching. They've made so much progress and they're okay, I think I'm here. Sometimes we have these moments of awareness that are oh my gosh, it's happening, right? Recently, I was on a call with my client. She just brought to my attention that she's having this realization that there's old her and present her, and it's it doesn't compute. One of the things that's very important, and again, I don't know the psychology behind this, but we have three parts to ourselves, right? We have our present self, which is you in the now, right? You have your past self, and then you have your future self. And a lot of the time I tell my coaching clients, especially when they come into the coaching relationships, just not sure what it is that they actually want to achieve, I make it very clear that the decision they're making is really in service of their future self, right? The person who you want to become, the person who you are imagining that you could be, right? Even though the person making that decision is your present self. However, your past self, right, is also so responsible for the person you are today. And that awareness is so important, I believe, because it helps you realize once you get to tomorrow, right, then your past self is who made the decisions that are impacting you today. One of the things that is so important in awareness is realizing you're not tied to who you were yesterday. And this has been such an important thing for me to learn especially as I grow as a person and as a coach, is to stop holding myself like responsible for the things that I did yesterday as if they will impact the things that I do tomorrow if I don't allow them to. Like almost like unaware that if I like somehow it will happen that yesterday's actions will totally impact tomorrow and I have no control of that. And that has given me permission to give myself so much grace to be okay with the person that I'm becoming. I think when you start to change your life and you start to change how you show up in life, it can be very uncomfortable because it's like you're kind of pulled between past self and future self. Like they're almost like in a tug of war, like who's going to win? It's always easy to fall back to past self because that's something you're comfortable with. That's something you've always been, right? Future self is very possibility based. Like you actually don't know what's out there because it's just like an imagination. One of the things that I think is so important in awareness is awareness of your thoughts. The reason is noticing the thoughts that your brain offers you all the time. I'll give you an example of a thought that I used to actually notice and like go with. And it's the thought that if I had a disagreement with my husband or he said something that I didn't like, I would have the thought, and this thought would be, he doesn't care. And I would take that thought and run with it, literally. What would happen is that it would cause me to feel an emotion that was uncomfortable. It could be resentment, it could be sadness, it could be anger. Taking that feeling, right, I would then do things that were feeding that emotion. So if I thought he didn't care and I felt frustrated, I would probably start a fight or look for all the things that he's doing wrong and try to like just nitpick on everything he's doing. And so the actions that I was taking were very much driving me into the result of I didn't care, right? So I had this thought that he doesn't care. And I did these things that actually I was the one that didn't care. And so awareness for me was looking at that thought and just going, if you're believing he doesn't care, like, is it true? Can you question that, right? Because not every thought that comes to your mind has to be believed. Like, we can't prevent thoughts from showing up, right? But we can pause and just be like, oh, do I want to notice that thought? Like, is that thought serving me? Like, do I like that thought? Maybe not. And then deciding that, like, you can just say, I'm having the thought that my husband doesn't care about me. And that slight switch is like realizing, one, you're not your thoughts, right? And so you have the agency to just like notice what's happening and decide, is this a thought I want to go with? And then if you decide not, you act from a feeling of awareness. So even that awareness can just be an emotion, right? You can be in awareness as an emotion in my mind. I don't know how like exact this is, but to me, awareness can be both an emotion and an action. When you show up from awareness, the actions that you take are very much different from the actions that you take if you don't question your thoughts. The other thing is when we start realizing we have negative thoughts, it can be very easy to use those thoughts to beat yourself up. And what I want to caution you is that if you find yourself having negative thoughts about your partner, about yourself, about situations, just notice if you're using those thoughts to beat yourself up versus questioning them. So it could be that you have a situation. I'll give you an example that's happened in my personal life where somebody said something or did something and I had the thought, I'm not a good person or I'm not good enough. And then I just started to beat myself up and I started looking for evidence of why I wasn't a good person. And in 2007, I said this. And in 2019, I did this. And in 2020, I, didn't do this and I forgot to do this. And I said this about this person and this happened. And I'm not a good friend and I'm not a good wife. Or I'm probably not even a good mother. And just like roller coaster, right? And it's like when I paused and went into awareness, I was like, what is even happening here? Versus just questioning the thought. Just like, oh, I'm having this thought I'm not a good person or I'm not good enough. And just going, is it true? Can I absolutely know that it's true? And if I continue to answer yes, who do I become when I believe the thought that I'm not good enough? And if I choose to question the thought, who do I become, right? So same thing, like if you have a thought about your partner that he doesn't care, and you just ask yourself, is it true? And maybe you're like, yeah, it's true, he doesn't care. And then you go, can I absolutely know that it's true? You're like, yeah, probably can, because now you're still in that like defensive mode, right? And then you ask yourself, who am I being when I believe this thought? Do I like the person I am when I believe this thought or not? And then who am I being if I chose not to believe this thought? That level of awareness is a game changer in so many relationships. And one of the things that I have had a very difficult time with, and I'm being very honest here, is that while I'm very good at processing emotions, I sometimes have this thought that the emotions have taken too long to go away. So like, for example, if I'm feeling sadness or frustration, I'm like, but I've been sad for 2 days. I want to feel better. And because I'm in awareness now, I like look at myself with so much compassion and just like, oh, that's what's wrong. You're protesting that it's taking too long. It's okay that it's taking too long. Like, who gets to decide that, right? Because sometimes I think we go into in the entitlement, especially when we get coached or we do thought work, we're like, I deserve to only have positive days because I have worked too hard not to have them, not to have negative days. But the reality of life being 50-50 is that we are going to experience both sides of the comfortable and uncomfortable emotions, whether we like it or not. What's different is how we show up in that dimension, right? So instead of beating yourself up and instead of just like fighting and resisting, be willing to question. And going back to willingness to feel negative emotion, right? Allow those emotions to be. And I'm speaking to me and to you because negative or uncomfortable emotions can be very, very, very like unpleasant to feel. And it's like sometimes you just think you can't even get out of bed. I remember when I was younger and I had gotten out of a very difficult breakup and I had just started dating again and I started dating this guy and the relationship wasn't going where I wanted it to go. And I literally woke up one morning and I was like, I can't even get out of bed. I can't even go anywhere. I was like, this just feels so like I was helpless. And I look back then, like on that day, I literally believed I couldn't get out of bed. I could not even brush my teeth. And I stayed in bed all day. And then I got up and then I was like, I can't even cook. I just ate like a slice of bread and milk and went back to bed. It's comical to think about it now, but sometimes like uncomfortable emotions can be almost like, I can't even just like brush my teeth, right? So of course you don't want to feel that. Of course it's like, oh, but I have to also like parent and I still have to like be a wife and a friend and a person. How am I supposed to walk around with these negative emotions and do all of those things? And the answer is holding space for yourself to be human and taking time outs. Just like, okay, I'm feeling overwhelmed. I think I'm going to step out for a minute. But like saying that because those emotions make you not want to get out of bed, you never want to feel them, it doesn't serve you. And one of the things that my coach had me do recently is actually put the feeling in the circumstance line of my model. Like I'm feel like sadness or frustration or anger. And then the thoughts I had about those feelings, and it was like, I don't deserve to feel this unhappy, or it shouldn't be taking so long, and this is not fair. And it was a lot of indulgent thoughts. Awareness helped me realize that level of indulgence wasn't serving me. And I was actually not creating a positive result for me. It was actually creating negative results, right? Because I was not willing to feel the uncomfortable emotions long enough to process what was happening to me. So it's important for you to just like be willing to feel negative emotions and not put a timeline on them. Because I promise you, it's not going to be forever. Like subconsciously, we all know that it's not going to be forever, right? But in the moment, it feels like absolutely going to be forever. So the other thing to realize about awareness is self-acceptance with accountability. So it's living without judging or shaming yourself, accepting yourself for who you are, but also being in awareness that you are capable of doing so much more if you put your purpose and mind into it. One of the things that I love to work on with my clients is when they bring something to coaching that like they say it in passing, they're like, yeah, and then I found myself in that moment wanting to pause. And I say to them, do you realize how much you've grown that you're now taking your time to live in awareness versus when you were so reactive? And, Viktor Frankl talked about like this gap between stimulus and response. And I think the more aware you are, the bigger it gets. And so that gap helps you show up in full, like, future self version of like 100%, I got this. And the longer you stay in awareness, the longer that like gap widens and you can literally process things in the moment. And so when my clients come to me and they share something with me that's been like a breakthrough for them in their marriage or a breakthrough for them with their children, I'm always very quick to point out that we need to first like sit and acknowledge that awareness. Because for themselves, maybe they haven't noticed how much growth they're doing, right? Especially, again, like type A people, type A women are like the women that I attract. It's very easy to just be like, oh yeah, and then I said this, and then I was like, oh yeah, this is because of coaching that I'm doing that. And I'm like, yeah, but 6 months ago, you didn't do that. Can we notice and give credit to that level of awareness? Which brings me to celebration. Now, what is celebration? According to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, knew I was going to give you that definition. Celebration is to perform publicly and with appropriate rites like Mass, or to honor an occasion such as a holiday, especially by solemn ceremonies or by refraining from ordinary business. This is my favorite one, because when we are celebrating, we just take a pause to like not going to the next coaching topic. Like, let's celebrate the fact that like last week, my client, who I just coached yesterday, had this moment where she used a Sutton startup to tell her husband exactly how she feels when he does something that has been creating these thoughts that have caused her to have feelings of resentment. And so she used the I feel sentence, and he listened, he paused, and then he said, oh, you heard that from your coach, didn't you? But it doesn't matter, right? Because once he heard like her, what she felt and what was happening, he was like, oh, I get it. I know what to do differently now. And so when people say to me, okay, well, if I do all these things, am I not giving my husband a free pass to just do whatever he wants? My question is, if you don't do any of those things, your marriage remains the same, your parenting remains the same, your relationship with your family remains the same, what's the alternative? Right? Isn't it better if you just pick the weird, awkward feeling thing and do it because it's going to give you a result that feels amazing, right? Of course, was it easy for my client to be like, when you do this, I feel, and what I really need is, of course not, right? It feels like when you were in like doing your psych lessons and you had to tell like the person, what I hear you saying is, and he was like, yeah, that's the answer you pick in the test, but I really would never say that to a person in real life. And now here comes Shiro telling me to say this to my husband. It feels like a script. It feels like weird, right? But the alternative is not saying anything, staying resentful, keeping on expecting somebody to read your mind, and that achieves nothing. So I just want you to notice when like I offer mindset shifts or somebody offers you mindset shifts or you do thought work and you feel called to change the way you're showing up and you feel some resistance coming up, I just want to offer you that resistance is normal. However, resisting it and not taking action only keeps you where you are. It keeps you stuck. So wouldn't you rather do the uncomfortable thing to get a result that creates positive momentum in your relationships, in your motherhood, in your career, in your dynamics with your neighbors and everybody around you? Wouldn't you rather do that? And I bring the example of neighbors because I had somebody reach out to me in the DMs, just telling me about a situation with her neighbors. And I offered her some coaching. She had requested it. And it felt so uncomfortable for her to have this perspective with her neighbors. Well, anyway, 6 months to a year later, she left me a voice note on my DM. And she was like, I just wanted to tell you how things with my neighbors have gotten so much better. We've resolved all this conflict. And I was like, yes, this is the power of being willing to do something uncomfortable that feels awkward and sticky because you're not used to doing it over and over. And then you do the thing and you see the result and it starts to become part of who you are, right? It's taking massive action. It's noticing how you have not showed up as your highest self. I've had situations over the last year where I'm very clear that that version of me wasn't me at my highest self. And I had a situation where something happened with somebody and I apologized and the apology was not accepted. And I beat myself up for so long over it. And then I had this moment of awareness, I did what I could. And now I'm going to forgive myself and live with the consequence of what happened without shaming, without judging, without hurting myself, just holding space for the person that I am. Because that person, even from 6 months ago, is not who I am today. And I refuse to live in the shackles of that person because that's not who I am. That's past self, right? So if I'm not changing and if I'm not in awareness of who I'm becoming, then of course I can't go back and think, yeah, I can take massive responsibility for then, and then I can take massive responsibility for now and show up completely differently and be okay with that, right? Because that means no longer protecting reputation, instead spending time and effort and energy building character, showing up as the person I know I was created to be, showing up as the highest version of myself who is processing her traumas, who is healing from her traumas, who is changing herself so that she can be an example of what's possible to other people, and honoring past self for even having made those mistakes, right? Because there wouldn't be mistakes to learn from if past self hadn't made them. And then honoring future self because that's the person I'm going to become, right? And the alternative, when we don't practice awareness and when we don't celebrate, is one, we're not fully aware. We're living our lives half-lived. We're not being fully present in our lives to notice what is working, what isn't. We're not evaluating our lives. We're not looking at our relationships and deciding to edit and filter and decide this is how I intentionally 100% want to show up in my marriage, in my friendships, in my motherhood, right? If we are not in awareness, we're not evaluating. We don't see what's working. We don't celebrate what's working. We don't notice what's not working and what we want to do differently so that we don't keep repeating the same patterns over and over and over and over, expecting different results. Getting up, getting resentful at your spouse, expecting tomorrow to be a better day. Doing the same thing over and over and over. Instead, evaluating and going, you know what? Resentment doesn't create the marriage that I want. I'm going to notice my resentment. I'm going to sit with it. I'm going to be uncomfortable with it. But by God, I will also notice the thoughts that are causing me to be resentful, question them, decide the other thoughts that I want to think on purpose, and change that. So the alternative for not being aware is staying the same. Staying the same isn't growing, right? When we're planted somewhere and we don't sprout from the ground, we don't turn into the thing that we were created to be. So the alternative to awareness and celebration is being stagnant, it's being stuck, it's staying in the same patterns over and over and over and playing victim and being helpless and being passive in our lives and not showing up active in our lives. Self-editing, playing small, right? when I listen to Brooke Castillo talk about the alternative to not celebrating yourself, and I'm going to quote her, it was so powerful. The alternative to not celebrating yourself is you never think about yourself. You're always just doing for other people. You're not acknowledging yourself and you're not celebrating yourself. And when you do that, you're living your life edited and filtered. And that's not who you were meant to be. And I wanted to share this episode on awareness and celebration because next week I'm going to be talking about how to change your life. And I think it's important for you to be so clear on what awareness means, to be aware of your thoughts, especially your negative thoughts, to look at the thought line of your models and see the thoughts that you're thinking over and over and over every day. And those thoughts, are they creating emotions that are uncomfortable or emotions that you don't want to be a permanent fixture in your life? Anger, sadness, frustration, hate, defensiveness, right? Do you want to feel those emotions over and over and over and over and over again? I'm not talking about processing the emotions, but do you want these to be the predominant emotions in your life, especially resentment? You know, there's a saying that resentment or bitterness is like drinking poison and hoping the other person dies. And you just keep doing it over and over and over. And that feeling of resentment, the actions that happen, only create results that are not moving you forward. So awareness of your thoughts is so important because you can start to be like, is this a thought I think all the time? I used to be friends with somebody who literally believed this thought that people were out to get her, that everybody was basically the enemy. People were going to get her somehow. And she would say it like she was saying the news. And now that I'm in awareness, I'm like, wow, it's just a thought you think over and over again, that people are out to get you, that people are bad. Like you're literally living in that dorsal vagal awareness that you're always like unsafe and uncomfortable, right? And again, we move from states. We move from sympathetic activation to dorsal vagal to ventral vagal. I'm not saying you should never go into dorsal vagal. But when you live in dorsal vagal response, you're literally always believing that things are unsafe and you're unconnected to other people and you should be protecting yourself. And how you show up in those relationships isn't a thing that creates even more connection with other people. It actually creates more disconnect. So I just thought that would be so important to talk about, and also to talk about celebrating our wins. I think it's so crazy to me that like we're high achieving smart women and we don't pause long enough to celebrate the little wins. To celebrate like, oh, I had a plan to work out. I got my 30-minute workout in. I had a plan to like do this thing with my kid and I did it. I had a plan to create a day date with my husband and we went on a day date. Like we don't stop enough. It's like we want the big things to celebrate, but we don't even want to celebrate ourselves and the things we're accomplishing. And I'll tell you, like I remember like my doctorate graduation, I was just like so done that I didn't want to celebrate. And my girlfriend threw this party and I'm so glad that she like pulled me out of that nonsense because I had a blast and I was like thinking about like the sweat and the blood and the tears that I went through to get this DMP with a newborn, trying to get all the things done, dealing with postpartum depression. Of course it was worth celebrating. And I'm glad I did. And not only did she throw a bomb party, she also like made me this picture book of the memories of that party. And it is like one of my favorite things to look at, to remember like how hard I worked to get that doctorate. But also, like it made me realize, what if I hadn't celebrated that moment? Like what was I saying? That all that work wasn't worth celebrating? Heck yes. Also, by the way, my doctorate program failed us miserably because it was during the pandemic that our graduation was going to happen and we never had a graduation, and that was not nice. Also, our class started school literally a week before Hurricane Harvey hit Houston. So all this to say, we should have had a major celebration. We should have had a big graduation, but we didn't. And I'm glad that we celebrated the graduation the way we did, that I have amazing humans in my life who acknowledge the things that I have worked so hard for, even when I'm not willing to. so that I can have memories that are worth looking at and just thinking, yep, I worked really hard to get here. So I want you to just notice when you're not celebrating yourself. Like, what are you waiting for to happen so you can celebrate your accomplishments? What are you waiting to happen for you to realize that showing up in full service of yourself and your family and your spouse is worth celebrating? I want you to just start celebrating the little things. Did you stick to your diet protocol? Celebrate it. Did you do your thought work today? Celebrate it. Did you create one customer in your business? Celebrate that. Did you make $1 in your business today? Celebrate that. I want you to celebrate the heck out of everything. Seriously, celebrate it all. Because when I look at my life a year ago and the things that I've accomplished now, if I hadn't celebrated the smaller wins, like booking my first client, booking 5 clients, like those steps that progressively have gotten me to be where I am in my business, right? The first 1,000 downloads of the podcast, the first 10 episodes. Yay, we made it to 50 episodes. And I remember like at August of this year, when I published episode number 80, which was like a week ago, and I was like, well, the podcast has been going for 2 years and I really should be at 104 episodes. And I was like, but I'm not. And this is awesome because I have showed up 80 times in the last 2 years to create value in the world, to share a message with other people. And that's worth celebrating. Could I have done 104 episodes? Absolutely, yes. Have I evaluated the reason I didn't do those episodes? Absolutely, yes. So celebration is so important. And if we don't create a culture where we celebrate things that other people might think that are minor, then we're only setting the standard for ourselves to only celebrate major wins. Listen, if you want to celebrate your half birthday, celebrate that. If you want to celebrate your 1.5 years marriage anniversary, celebrate that. I want you to celebrate all the things. Okay? That is all I have for you today. I know I went off on a tangent there with the celebration. But seriously, awareness and celebration is so important. And I don't know how to implore you to start celebrating. Normalize that in your life. And be aware that you're only creating more results in your life when you celebrate and stay in awareness. That's all I have for you today. I will see you next week. Have a great week. Bye now. I'm Shira Bergbauer, and you've been listening to the Stethoscopes to Swaddles podcast. New episodes are out every Monday. These episodes are created by me, Shira Bergbauer, and produced by Cassidy Mitchell. If you enjoyed this show or found it helpful, please rate it and review us on Apple Podcasts. If the concepts I share on this podcast resonate with you, or you're ready to change your relationships and mindset, I can help you. If you'd like in-depth, personalized support, I'd love to invite you to apply for my Life and Mindset coaching program. Just imagine you and I every week working together as I teach you the tools to up-level your life. To book your free 1-hour consultation call, go to www.stethoscopestoswaddles.com/consultation. You're doing a great job, Mama. Have a great week. Bye now.